This one, 2, 1, 2. Test this one, 2, 1, 2.
Every single tournament. You didn't manage to win GSL Koda season 3. And of course, these two actually ran into each other in the lower bracket of an amazing tournament we had earlier this year. That was the team.
Test this one, 2, 1, 2. Test this one, 2, 1, 2.
Unfortunately, they started in the lower bracket, so they both flew from Korea. Started in the lower bracket.
Test. 1, 2, 1, 2. Test. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Wasn't the best series. It was fun. It was close, but it was kind of like the games just ended rather quickly. And
Sitting back a little bit. Try and see what the balance is going to be like. Turn them down a little bit. Turn myself down a little bit.
This is what you want to see from Hero. Like Maru was aware of it, that this guy can play crazy.
We're actually going to start this over, but I just wanted to make sure that
When you are scanning your opponent, you get to see what's going on, which he's only going to do that with a Reaper, right? You're already going to start.
Okay, I'm a little loud still. I just wanted to make sure that the sound balance was on. This is finally a challenge for Hero and goes on for a while. So, it won't be a big deal to start. Go back a couple minutes. Alright. Still going to turn them up a little bit more. It's tough because their volume changes a lot. Maybe I should remove my mic. Sorry, I'm touching the mic. Moving my mic slightly closer. Test 1, 2, 1, 2. Test 1, 2, 1, 2.
I mean, the thing that's wily about this map in specific, it's got that pocket base in the back as well, where it's like, oh, you don't have that natural, you don't have this either. All right, what on earth?
So the main current ESL Masters is going on right now. So if you guys are,
then he's gonna know, like, all right, it's not gonna be Dark Templars and whatnot, but the probe kill from earlier as well at the tower. Not
sorry, hold on one sec.
But is he aware of what's going on?
Yep, he saw the Twilight Council, and at that point you're like,
Test. Yeah, too loud. So so the current ones. Going on right now. Most of you are probably watching this on YouTube later, so it doesn't make a difference. But after doing an extensive analysis of a relatively short game 1 between my guy Hero here and the American Protoss player whose name is, of course, Estrella, I peeked.
There's not going to be a robot on the field for quite some time, so if you can use that Banshee just to help out with the defense.
This is still too loud.
Hero is a cheeky voice.
I peeked ahead because it was less than a half hour for the entire supposed best of 5.
This isn't the normal kind of Protoss play you see at all, but Maru will be aware that he is against a goal base now.
Yep. It's not just the standard goal base, right?
And Hero wins the second game in like literally less than 4 minutes, and then the third in like 7. He completely broke Estrella with that first game, and so it's not actually that fun to go through those other 2 games. I have some better Hero versus another Protoss matches. One versus Showtime in Valencia from a couple of years ago, and some other ones where they go longer and it's a bit more competitive. At least some of the games. Although he still mostly dominates. So, alright, so here we are 5 minutes into Hero versus Maru. We'll do a quick pause. So, welcome back to Bizzle Academy. Professor Bizzle here, doing Starcraft for noobs. And I've been starting by doing a bunch of Hero analyses. I started by doing an embarrassing loss to then very young 17-year-old just getting started Rainer, the Italian youngin, who's now one of the best in the world. But back in 2019 when they faced off in the WCS World Championships, I'm gonna keep this playing just to get the sound going. Even though Hero was by far the favorite, way more experienced, he didn't take Raynor seriously. He didn't take the matchup seriously. Raynor had obviously studied film on Hero, and even though Hero went up 2-1 in a 5-game series with Raynor, and ended up losing 3-2, and all the games were very close, it was mostly just because Raynor was young and inexperienced and playing more conservatively than usual. Hero was playing very sloppy, and despite that, he had multiple chances in every game to beat Raynor, but just couldn't focus enough and stop his sloppy and even for Hero, overly wacky and irrational play, that eventually in each of Raynor's 3 wins, he would eventually find a way to take advantage of one of Hero's mistakes. If Hero played Raynor today in that way, and Raynor was today's Raynor would smoke him. But that being said, in the actual matchup in 2019, if Hero had been just a little bit more focused and motivated, he should have smoked Raynor. He had so many opportunities in those games, despite all his mistakes, to beat Raynor. So it's a very interesting, as a huge Hero fan like I am, it's really interesting to watch him, cause himself to lose, basically, even though the player he lost to is now one of the best in the world. But at the time was a series that he still should have won, even with all of his mistakes and sloppiness. But then I wanted to jump to Hero being dominant Hero. Specifically last November in Atlanta, the 2022 finals, Dreamhack ESL finals, which are the same or related to what's going on right now, with the finals are going to be in Sweden in a few weeks, in June. Hero did end up going all the way. He ends up beating Maru in a long best-of-5 here, and then a long best-of-5 against Bunny, who was a complete unknown at the time, but now is been placing in all the major tournaments, and is a rising star. And Hero, I believe, goes down in this series and in this is best-of-5, and I believe he goes down in the best-of-7 against Bunny 3-1 and ends up winning 4-3 with the big almost reverse sweep comeback. I mean, coming back from 3-1 is almost like coming back from a potential sweep, with the almost reverse sweep. But it's amazing going from the quarterfinals with a not great Protoss player, Estrella, to Maru, who's widely considered one of the best players, period, ever. One of the best current players, one of the best Terran players ever, and currently has won, I believe, the most money, or among the most money ever, most total games. But he's a classic example of the guy who constantly is winning and constantly is making money and constantly is getting first places, but when it comes to offline, in-person, high-profile matches like here in Atlanta or like in Poland earlier this year in 2023 when Oliveira ended up beating him to win the whole thing, Maru just doesn't have that many premier first-place finishes for all of his hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of big wins over a long career. And there's no way he's not taking Hero seriously, both being Korean, but specifically both being veterans, and him knowing that Hero's a legend and having, I'm sure, seen a ton of Hero games before he even became a living legend himself, Maru that is. There's no way he's not taking it seriously. He doesn't seem to have the personality, Maru, to choke. He just, can't go from 5th to that nebulous 6th gear that you need in the final rounds of these ginormous international matchups. So here we are 10 minutes in to the first game, and this is when I always talk about Hero likes to launch his first major offensive at around 9.5 minutes, and he does in fact have over 60 army, which isn't huge, but he's got some Colossi, and a couple of Mortals, and a bunch of Stalkers, which is a really nice ground force. And enough Stalkers to take out your occasional Banshee or other air unit that gets thrown against him. Both Maru and Bunny in the finals are Terran players. Terran Zerg are often the most exciting games, but Terran Protoss with the best players can be really, really exciting. And this is one of my favorite series. both because of just generally the players in it and what goes on the board. But it's amazing, you know, I mean, Estrella in 3 games in the previous round didn't even get this far in any of the games. But certainly with Maru at 160 supply and Hero at 131, and they're still building with plenty of room. I'll bring out the mouse here. I got to increase the I got to increase the mouse setting.
I think so too. He's sticking around for a long time. I mean, this is his power spike, right? That is a lot of Colossus, but that is...
So here are the Colossi, 4 of them in the hands of Hero, absolutely deadly against infantry, even heavy infantry like Marauders. But there are quite a bit of Marauders rather than Marines, which are more susceptible to the attack of those tall Colossi. And Hero lost quite a few units, and Maru stood pretty strong in that little push forward. So already 11 minutes and 22 seconds in most games. Hero would be going for his second big army push, but he's still trying to even get a first big army. Now he's attacking just with Colossi without protection against Marauders, who have armored protection against units like the Colossi. His army just isn't balanced enough. Now Maru senses blood in the water with the Colossi being low on health. Now he uses an armor debuff attack that I believe the Ravens have to slow them down. I can't remember which unit has that. So the orange units have been slowed and weakened or whatever. Full retreat for Hero. He's down to 52, now 56 units. Maru's up to 90 army. Maru has a bigger economy. He's got more workers going, and he's just mobile, moving all over the map. And he must have been expecting those Colossi, because normally you'd have more Marines, which are the little red guys, and fewer of these bigger black and red infantry guys, which are Marauders, because Marauders aren't as good for the money overall, but they are armored, and those tall Colossi, for as powerful as they look, are mostly good against unarmored units. And they also are susceptible to air units just because they're so tall, hence all of the Vikings. And so Maru went into this game expecting Colossi for some reason, even though Hero hasn't been using them very much in the tournament. Now Maru's doing one of his late game tricks when he's behind, which is to build Dark Templar, who are cloaked, and if he can sneak them behind enemy lines, can get some jobs done. And by throwing a bunch of disruptors at the enemy here, and putting the Dark Templar in the middle to try and hide them from potential observers or detectors. There are just way too many Maru units coming from the east and the north. Those air units are going to take out the Colossus because it's susceptible to air and ground attacks. It's about to go down. There it goes. And he's got the Marine Force with the Marauders and the Air Force. The problem for Maru is he can't keep relying on Marauders and Vikings, who, other than attacking Colossi and a couple of other units from different races, aren't actually that great the way that Marines and the medevacs, which are transporting and healing them, are good in almost every situation. That siege tanks, which he's not using in this match, are good in almost situation. So Maru just outguessed Hero, but Hero has already transitioned, moving his army close to 100, Maru at 110 army power. But he's transitioned into more disruptors, which also aren't great against Marauders, and are better against the smallest units, like Ghosts, who are snipers but weak, and the Marines, and so forth. But he does have a ton of Stalkers, who are good in every phase of the game and can attack air and ground, and any air defense for the Protoss is powerful. But it's hard for him to pull the Dark Templar trick with the cloaked Templar melee units, because all of these bases have an added orbital command radar added on top of it for Maru, and he is just scanning the whole map, clearing fog of war, revealing cloaked units, and he just bombed out a whole bunch of Hero's units. Hero was already prepared with his tons of gateways and a couple robotics bays to keep producing more disruptors. He's up to 6 disruptors already, so that's his main defense right now, is that maybe he can pull 2 or 3 disruptor Nova explosions off at the same time. They're both pulling towards 200 supply, which is max. Maru is really almost maxed out and is sitting on money. Both of them at about 70, 75 workers is enough for both Marines, Terrans and Protoss, excuse me. But this gap of 20 or 30 or 40 military units just keeps remaining between the sides. And while Protoss can overcome that with the right balance, the Terrans don't have to be quite as precise. They just have to outnumber and keep throwing Marines into the field. And these Vikings, which are staying in flying mode, they can go into ground mode, but they're not great there. They're staying in flying mode, and boom, that's it. Maru just attacked one of Maru's major heroes' major supply lines, and then takes out his last big major unit in the Immortal. But now he's building another command center, Maru that is. And now he's got a mix of Widow Mines, which plant themselves and explode. He's got Ghosts, who can snipe bio units. He's got Marauders, who are armored and can survive against those tall Colossi, which were completely stopped being built smartly by Hero, because they were getting taken out by the Marauders and the Flying Vikings. And Hero's using an absolutely tiny force. Now the Liberators are coming out from Maru into Defender mode, bombing the ground as opposed to tanks. And you add the Ghosts and the Marines and the Marauders. Just a great mix of air attack and support units, and an awesome mix of ground units, even with no siege tanks. But he does throw in those Liberators at the end, which are basically flying siege tanks, where they go into lockdown mode and just bomb the crap out of ground modes. So I'm gonna pause it for 1 sec, because I want to see how far it was when they ended. They ended right before 17 minutes. And Hero was constantly just trying to catch up in terms of economy and army. So if we go to 7.5 minutes, you can already see, while they're equal in workers and their economies are similar, Maru already has a major unit lead 7.5 minutes in. So we jump to 9.5 minutes, which is when, as I keep saying, Hero loves to do his first big attack, and 63 army units, or I should say army power. It's fewer than 63 units, because most army units take up more than one supply slot. And he's got a few big ones with those tall Colossi with their big laser beams. But 9.5, you look at the mini map, it looks very even, with them having 3 or 4 bases in the northeast and the northwest. Here's one of those tricky old maps where they spawn close to each other, which really is always favored against Protoss players, because even when you're unconventional like Hero and are attacking early, unlike most Protoss players who spend 10 to 15 minutes just trying to build up their economy, Hero's already attacked multiple times in that time and building up his economy. And Hero has a base down here in the south that you can't see behind the slider bar or whatever. I guess let me start playing it from here, from 925, because he's still doing hit and runs, is Hero, not getting close to the base. Maru must have scouted that Colossi were being built, because he starts building those Flying Vikings, and he starts building those armored Marauders to take him down, because they can defend against the Colossus's beams, and can hit back much harder than they could take. The Colossus are really meant to take down Marines and individual siege tanks, neither of which Maru is using much in this match. Now we're at 10 minutes. Maru's up on the upgrade battle a little bit, and up on the worker and army battle a little bit, but still on paper, especially with someone like Hero, you think he's very much in the game. Take a quick look up at the production tab. You see he's still building Colossi to get to that magic number 4. It's either 3 or 4 is the magic number. Outside of that, it just becomes excessive and they become hard to control. He's also building a lot of sentries, which is not normally his game. So 2 units that he doesn't normally use as much as he uses here, he's spending all of his money and time on. Meanwhile, a great mix of buildings, upgrades, and units. Pretty much for Maru, nice balance of 2 or 3 at a time Vikings, Marauders, which are heavy armored infantry, and light infantry and Marines. Marines are the better overall unit, especially in large numbers. But again, Maru must have gotten the drop that Colossi were being built. And because the Vikings are not good against other air units generally. And Marauders are not... unlike Marines, which attack ground and air well in both cases, considering their money, which is very relatively low. Marauders are expensive, and while they can take a lot of damage, they can only attack ground damage. They attack slowly, and they can go out very quickly. But again, if the main part of Hero's force is going to be those tall but delicate and brittle colossi, as beautiful as they are, and then the little sentry bots to help keep their shields up, it's just not going to work. He's trying to cover it up by having a good number of stalkers, but here with just two, look at this, with just two colossi, he's going up against a large force of Terrans that's split into two, which means they can't all be focus fired on in the same place. He's got Marauders over here, which are in perfect place to take damage and not die from the Colossi, and to hit back at the Colossi. And here, while the Medivacs are doing their healing thing on both Marauders and Marines, he's going to use this Raven to do an interference matrix thing that will paralyze units and make them blind and so forth. And we're going to start seeing those flying Vikings, which in a very cool touch of game design, but very frustrating if you're a Protoss player, is these Colossi are so tall that they can walk up and down cliffs. So they're almost like air units in avoiding terrain other than open spaces, but they can go from different elevations without having to go around to ramps or whatever. But they're so tall, they're vulnerable to air units with full attack damage. So when you add the heavy damage of the Marauders, the supports of the Medivacs, and the Raven, boom, just hit. You can see this Raven here from Maru just shot a little missile thing, one of the two Colossi, and it's now the equivalent of poisoned. I don't know the official effect and the exact numbers, but it slows it down, and I believe drains its shields, and maybe drains its energy. It doesn't have energy because it doesn't have special attacks, but it might be draining shields. It's hard to tell, or maybe it's just slowing it down, or it can't attack. This would be something that would be good. This would be something to be good to look at really quickly, as we switched to my my browsers to look up this sort of thing. Let's look at the Raven. Yeah, what he sent is called, so the orange thing, when he turns in a little bit, he's going to turn the units orange. It's an anti-armor missile, and enemy units that get hit by the splash damage turn orange. Reduces their armor by 2 and their shield armor by 2 for 21 seconds, which for Protoss is double whammy. The thing that turns the units black that just happened is called interference matrix, as I said, and disables a mechanical or psionic unit. Obviously, those tall colossi are mechanical, rendering it unable to attack or use abilities for 11 seconds, and reveals cloaked units. The Colossi don't have special abilities, just has that big laser, but being unable to attack, now it's just a large vulnerable unit that's not doing anything. Alright, let's jump back in. 10 minutes, 22 seconds. The Colossi is done with the interference matrix, but he's still waiting for those other two Colossi to come into the battle. The moment their units are similar, but you can see the economic spread starting to grow, with Maru having 14 more probe or SCVs in the case of Terrans, their version of probes or drones, the worker bots. So that means he's getting more minerals and more gas for his units, and tons of Medivacs, which can transport all these ground units in a heartbeat, but more importantly, just sit back and heal them while they take way more damage than they should. Heroes trying to use the sentry units, these little glowy bots, to create these force fields and split the army up, but it's not really working effectively. He's pushing forward. This is called a Cyclone, which was a late added unit for Terran. It's not one you play in the single player campaign or most co-op stuff, so it's mostly just a versus multiplayer unit. It is very fast, but it gets damaged quickly, but it can attack ground or air effectively. It can also lock onto air units, which combined with its speed and fast air attack can take down air units with just a single one of them. But they're also a target for the other side because they are pretty squishy, considering they look like a big giant missile super tank. They go down much easier than tanks. I don't know the exact difference of hit points. Why don't we look that up right now real quick? So the siege tank, which he's not using in this match, but I'm almost sure he will use in future matches, has a speed of over 3. Has 175 hit points, whereas Cyclones have a speed of almost 5, which is incredibly fast, 120 hit points, which is quite a bit less, and significantly less armor. But they upgrade well, and they do 18 damage to ground and air with quick cooldowns, which is more than tanks can do unless you put tanks into their siege mode where they have to stop and they're very vulnerable or whatever. So that's what the Cyclone does, which is this unit right here. So we still have the 2 Colossi. Here come 2 more Colossi, but as often happens, even though you can get them into battle quickly because they can walk over terrain, what happens is they get damaged along the way because they're slow and they're kind of hard to follow. So here now we're going into battle. Hero still has a major decrease in army strength, but the key is that Maru's superiority in army strength is being shown in all these engagements. He's not holding them back or have them in the wrong place. He knows that Hero's going for Death Ball single giant unit build in this mission. He clearly knew that he was building Colossi, which is why he built the Viking air units, but especially the Marauder heavy ground units.
I mean, this is his power spike, right? That is a lot of Colossus, but that is a big concave of bio already ready. That model, that goes
right,
down.
talking about a power spike that's not coming through for Hero. As you can see, now it's 73 to 46. Now here come the Viking flying units, which also can attack the Colossi. He's lost 2 of the Colossi. He's trying to keep Hero, that is, the units that he has grouped together for some kind of group protection, but it's just leading to splash damage or focus fire on units with so relatively few units grouped so much together. As you can see up here in the production queue, Marine units are not nearly as cheap as Zerg units, but they're also way cheaper than Protoss units. So while we're only getting 1 or 2 at a time with Hero when he's not doing a beam-in of infantry, we're getting 2 Vikings, 2 Marauders, and 2 Marines just consistently over and over again from the Marines. And while I'm not a great Terran multiplayer player, I'm not really good at any multiplayer player in any of the races. I mostly play Protoss just because I have the most fun playing them. That being said, I know which units you want to do this to in both single player and multiplayer environments. And when you decide on Vikings and Marauders are going to support the Marines, you want to build multiples of all of them constantly and just bring out 6 to 10 units at a time to support your armor. Your army, which is already winning all of its engagement, and just as importantly, keeping them in relatively neutral territory, or at least not in the Terran base. So very little base damage and almost no worker damage for Maru by Hero, which is unusual to the extreme for Hero this far into the game. So again, here we are at the 11.5 minute point. This is normally when Hero, when he's ahead or things are even, when he launches his second big attack, but he has only 3 Colossi in their damage and not a lot of overall total units. He's trying to get disruptors out, and you'll see that his final strategy here, or tactic to survive a few more minutes, is to just put out a ton of disruptors and hope to get lucky with a bunch of Nova explosions, but they're against the wrong kinds of units and they don't succeed. The guys just made a shouting noise, the announcers. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Where are we? Okay, I'm gonna listen to them for a sec.
With those upgrades finishing.
It obviously always feels so tempting. Oh, okay, Maru is like, hey, these mines have been
And
here
you
for a
guys
little
too.
while. Let's go ahead and run them into the natural. Hero is aware of it and does pick off one of them, but these mines are
I'm gonna put my
permanently
headphones on.
Oh, 12 probes. That was lovely time.
Oh, it was off screen. He had a Widow Mine hidden there that wasn't being spotted by an Oracle. Another unit that Hero uncharacteristically not being used. So here's the end of that last battle where Hero loses more than Maru, and somehow Maru sneaks a Widow Mine into the blue area. It might be this base down at the bottom, which is always the danger. Or it might be this sneaky base over on the right side that Hero's trying to sneak past Maru. But again, you don't have to do physical scouting when you've got multiple orbital commands, and you can just hit that, what's it called? What do they call the thing? Orbital command, just a scanner sweep, I guess is what it's called.
He's outstayed his welcome a little bit here, and he knows it.
The upgrades are so good for Maru as well.
So okay, so the Raven, there was a Raven. They might have just blown up the one Raven, but it did get off the anti-armor missile, and so yep, it got it off. I don't know where it is. I'm trying to spot the Raven, but all of these big units that are now orange and a bunch of the small units are now susceptible in both their shields and physical armor. This is deadly against Protoss by Terrans, and now he's got enough Vikings which can take down Colossi because they're so tall, so they count as air and ground units when it comes to attack. Plus all of these Marauders, Widow Mines, which are just big underground bombs as you would expect, and your Marines. Now he's even bringing out Ghosts who can snipe some of the biological Protoss units that are out there. I believe the Stalkers, which are the ones you see over and over and over again, are considered both biological and mechanical, which means they're susceptible to attacks to both of those things. Yeah, nope, they're just mechanical and armored. So those Ghosts that are coming out, and Ghosts in this game, in terms of their offensive firepower. I don't know if you can see him over here. You can see him building them up here. He's building 4 at the moment, which is a lot to build of anything. But Ghost is making a heavy push on Ghost. That's what he's using to finish this game. One of the Ghost specials is to do heavy damage, but it's only against biological units. And mostly effective because it's a single snipe against big biological units, and only the Zerg have big biological units for the most part. So so you're thinking, why is he building them? Well, they're good in general because they're cloaked, and when they do shoot, it's fairly powerful. But they also have an EMP. We'll jump to the browser here real fast. Open the Ghost page, and you'll see that unlike a lot of units which lose their special abilities in multiplayer, they keep Cloak, Steady Targeting, which is a sniper round, which ignores armor and can target only biological units. But again, that's really only efficient and effective because of how long it takes against large biological units, and therefore Zerg and not Protoss, who he's currently playing. But that you can also get EMPs. In fact, they come with EMPs. You don't have to research them. I guess they come with... Yeah, I think they come with EMPs, whereas you have to research in other types of versions of Starcraft. It drains 100 shields from Protoss and drains 100 energy from any units, and cloaked units are revealed. So with that EMP, as we jump back to the game here, if there are any Dark Templar, which is Hero's late game strategy, very briefly in a minute now, who are permanently cloaked, they would be seen by the EMP of the Ghosts who are being built, not quite built yet. Again, all these orange Protoss mean that their armor and shields have been crippled, and therefore they're extra susceptible to damage when they're already way outnumbered by superior units. And so those Ghosts are coming in to shoot EMPs to take down shields very quickly from the units that are left from Hero. And it doesn't matter if you get a small Stalker or a tall Colossi, they both survive based on their shield as opposed to their normal hit points. And so a bunch of Ghosts at once against Protoss. If you can use the EMP, which again, I believe you have to, yeah, it's a manual. First of all, it costs 75 energy, which is a ton because no unit can have more than 200, and they don't start with that much. It does have a range of 10, which is, I believe, is that also the normal range for Ghost? Let's see, the normal range for Ghost, let's see, 10 plus 10. No, only 6. 6 with their rifle. It does have a 13 or a 14 range with the steady targeting, but again, that's only for biological units. So the EMP with a range of 10 is significantly further. And so while it costs a lot, it's even a fully charged Ghost, which takes a while to get to, will only be able to shoot off 2, and you have to manually do it by targeting the unit and using the E key. It won't do it automatically. But, you know, these guys are so good that with 4 Ghosts, he can do it. There's still a ways to go. Ghosts build slowly. They're not the most expensive. I meant to look up. Ghost in multiplayer is, let's see. Oh, they do start the Ghosts with 75 in versus, which is a huge advantage, because that means that they can immediately do an EMP shot, which costs 75. Most units start with 25 or 50 energy out of 200, not 75. And Ghosts are actually relatively cheap. It's a lot of gas. I mean, for a Protoss player, it's not a lot of gas. But at 150 minerals and 125 gas, but only 2 supply, it does have a 30-second build time, which takes a little bit of time, and it needs a bunch of prerequisite buildings, so they're, by necessity and by construction, in terms of the game itself, late game units. So they take a little while to build. Just to compare, Stalkers also take 30 seconds to build, but again, you're beaming them in the warp gate with only 4 or 5 seconds, and they're quote unquote building on, you know, in the background on top of a or up in space, you know, on a Protoss spaceship, and beaming in large numbers. So you can't really compare build times because while you can do while you can upgrade your barracks so that you can have 2 units coming out at once, it's only for the basic units like Marines, not for things like Ghosts. So if he's building 4 Ghosts, so 12 minutes in, Maru has a big lead in everything. And if we look at the build, we see that Hero's still trying to get some disruptors out there just to scare Maru, maybe. He's trying to get some Dark Templar out there, who might be able to sneak behind enemy lines with their cloaking. That's going to end up failing, but he's going to try it anyways. But making a Marauder, 3 Marines, and 4 Ghosts, it means that he's probably producing from 8 different barracks. I don't know if any of his barracks... let me see real quickly. I don't know if any of his barracks have the tech lab or the reactor. I always mix this up. The tech lab allows advanced units like the Ghosts. The reactor allows you to build 2 units at once. But the Ghost, as we see here, needs a tech lab, so you can only build 1 at a time, and the Ghost Academy, which is its own building, although you can get nukes through that. Plus, you know, of course, the barracks that it's coming out of. Marauders generally are not built 2 at a time, but Maru has 2 levels of armor, 2 levels of infantry weapon upgrades and 2 levels of infantry armor upgrades, while Hero just has 1 level for 1 type of weapon upgrade. So Maru's units are even more powerful than they usually are. So that 84 to 47 giant advantage by Maru in army strength is actually more dramatic than it looks, because of most of those units by Maru are these infantry units, which take advantage of these upgrades. And while a couple extra points of damage per attack doesn't seem like a lot, when you increase a Marine from 6 to 9, fully upgraded, but you've got 30 Marines, well, let's see, that's 9 damage times 30 is 270, when normally it would be 6 damage times 30, which would be 180. So 50% more damage, but more importantly, if you get 20, 30, 40 Marines out there, you're doing hundreds of points of more damage per attack, even with just that 3 per unit, because you've got so many of them. Protoss can't afford, of course, to put out that many of any type of unit. All right, they're mentioning that the Dark Templar cloaked assassin units for Hero are coming out, and he's still building those disruptors.
Just to create some chaos, because obviously chaos often.
And this is Hero's chaos strategy, which is he normally does this at the beginning of the game as well, and especially, but he will do it late when he's losing, and he's trying to use a couple ghosts that he rushed out to cause chaos with Maru's supply line. He's totally unsuccessful. Now he's got one Colossus that's low on shields and health. And again, now he does get to the second offensive upgrade. He does take out a ghost with Dark Templar, but he's going to start losing ghosts. All of these scanner sweeps that are coming from the command centers of Maru's Terran bases, the orbital commands, are revealing any cloaked units in the areas and revealing, I don't know, permanently or semi-permanently, the fog of war of that area of the map. Very hard to sneak a handful of ghosts this late in the game on a bunch of Terran command centers that have been upgraded to orbital commands, or orbital HQs, whatever they are, and can scan the map so easily to pick out cloaked units. Normally you would see a Raven or some other kind of unit that could spot cloaked units, but now he's got the ghosts out. Those 4 ghosts that he was producing, Maru that is, first of all, he's maxed out at supply. He can only build 1 or 2 or 3 at most more units. So there's even more army than what we're seeing on screen for the red guys here, for Maru's Terrans. But more importantly, these white units here, 1, 2, at least the 4 that he was building, and maybe he had more before, and he's shooting EMPs, and those EMPs are just tearing into the shields of all the Protoss units, because all Protoss use the shields. And it's important to point out as well that not only is it draining 100 shield and 100 energy, the EMP area effect range is 1.75. It doesn't sound like a lot. It's less than 2. But it's actually quite a lot, almost 2 units of area in each direction. And so especially with how closely together this one army of Hero has been, and often is the case with Protoss armies, is here. So these are missiles coming from flying Vikings, but again, this tall Colossus is susceptible as if he were an air unit because of how tall he is, and the mini missiles that are coming from the ghost sniper units on the ground are EMPs, which are disabling, lowering shields, lowering any special energies, which prevents you, for example, from blinking your stalkers, because that's considered a special power and requires energy to do. There's just too much offensive force. It's way more than he actually needs. Here go a couple disruptor shots with the Purification Nova. It does look like it, with all this blood and some exploding bodies, to hit some things, but the overall army power count is just too high with Maru, and the Colossus is going to die from the air units, and now the Vikings maybe are going to start getting destroyed, but they did their purpose. Again, they seem like versatile, fast, good air units, but they're really only good against the Colossus and a couple other non-traditional matchups. They've done their duty. The Colossi are gone, I believe, off the board completely, and from this point on, which is only a couple more minutes until end of match and good game, I don't believe Hero tries any more Colossi, because there's just a ton of Marauders who don't take a lot of damage from the Colossi, and it's these flying Viking units, along with ranged shooters like Marines and Ghosts, who are also being healed. There's just literally every affordable, relatively fast to build and cheap to build unit that's at the hands in the arsenal of Maru's Terran army is being built en masse, and has been built en masse almost from the beginning of the game, or at least when the action really got started. And so after all that, Hero in 13.5 minutes ended up only getting 14 Colossi out, taking out very few units with them and losing all of them. So here we see Maru is 112 army strength to Hero 79, but again, if you look at how many units Hero's trying to produce at once, I mean, he's trying to produce 18, I keep wanting to call them Sentinels or Centurions, Zealots, the basic unit. These can't be Warpins because that would mean, along with 3 Dark Templar and 2 Stalk Wars, that he would have 23 Warp Gates. There's no way that he has 23 Warp Gates. What it means is he still has some traditional gateways, and he's queuing up these basic infantry units because he's desperate to get them out. He doesn't have time to turn them into Warp Gates, but they're only going to come out one at a time. And it's already too late for him to try a Dark Templar trick. I mean, 8 Disruptors. He's just spent... Hero just basically saved up a bunch of money for a little while and now spent it all on queuing up units, hoping he can get some sort of force out in the main part of his... army on the map here, as this exposed sneaky base in the south gets fully attacked by the mobile and quite strong and diverse, well-balanced army of Maru's Terrans. So there's not actually that much here. They've already mined out. This was a gold field, which is why he went here. Gold is worth much more than the usual blue minerals, but they run out really fast. And so while normally you're able to get 16 to 20 workers mining at once, this one can only handle 6 because he's already mined out the field. That's what he used. He used all of that money to buy those 18 queued up Zealots, which only cost minerals. It's the one Protoss unit that don't cost gas. He's still getting some gas. That won't last long once Maru takes down the base if he decides to do so. Here you see a ton of those melee units, their basic infantry, the Zealots. So, you know, whenever you're relying on a giant Zealot army against very well-balanced air and ground combined force of Terrans, not a good sign for the hero player, for the Protoss player here being played by Hero. There goes the Disruption Nova. It does get a few of Maru's units, and he has a lot of Disruptors on the field that just sort of look scary, and so Maru has to not get clumped up. But again, with Protoss units, and one of the many reasons they always remain inferior is there's always a catch, and the catch is, even though it looks like they're flying, the giant Purification Nova that these Disruptors shoot out only hit ground units, and so it doesn't count against all of these medevacs, which are the most important units because they're keeping the Marines, Marauders, and Ghost infantry units alive battle after battle after battle. It's not going to affect these flying Viking units. And even though they look like they're flying or at least floating, they get damaged by ground units, which is Maru's specialty with his Terran force right now. So they're there as a last-minute attempt to scare, while I assume he tries, Hero tries the last-minute rush of a whole bunch of Zealot basic melee units and maybe sneak in some Cloaked Dark Templar behind enemy lines. So there's a ton of Disruptors, which would be scary if there were a ton of Marines and a bunch of siege tanks that were stuck in siege mode, but he has neither of those things. With this giant orbital, this is a huge orbital command scan here. I don't know how it got so big. They're not usually this big, but he easily picked up that Cloaked Dark Templar and took him out with his infantry. So he can't use Colossi, as we saw, because he's got the perfect mix, does Maru, with his Terran force against those tall but fragile Colossi. The Disruptors aren't taking out anything. They're just there to scare Maru, but Maru doesn't even have a ton of units that are susceptible to their big explosions, which rarely hit. So he's down to Disruptors, which are for just mental fortitude more than anything else, and a lot of Stalkers and a couple of sentries to maybe keep them shielded or restore shields. Here goes some more Purification Novas. Don't get anywhere near. Now the Disruptors get blown up. Another Purification Nova doesn't do anything. Now another base lands, even while all this is going on. At the perfect time, he lands a pre-built command center. One of the major advantages, going back to original Starcraft, by the Terrans is that their command centers in their basic form, and their main unit buildings, their barracks, their factories, and their starports can literally lift up and fly across the map. They're slow and they can be attacked and blown up while they're in the air, but it also means you can build them behind friendly lines, and whether your opponent can see you building them or not doesn't matter because they're protected. So Maru was able to build this command center at one of his heavily protected early bases and then fly it down here. And because he's so ahead in offensive units and keeps pushing any possible hero offensive back to middle of the ground or further, he's able to just land it. It's full of workers that are inside and have accompanied it, and immediately he's got a 5th base that's pre-built and is going to start mining more minerals. And at this point, especially because he spent so much gas on Marauders and Ghosts and air units and resisted the giant marine build that's so common for Terrans, now he's just going to, with this new base, probably not even worry about gas, go straight for minerals, get tons of marines who only cost 50 minerals and 0 gas, and build quickly to then bump up this 116 to a higher number and just overwhelm with upgrades and just pure sheer force anything that's left. Now Maru is up against the 200 supply limit, so he can only build 6 marines at the moment, but he's expecting a bunch of these units to die to maybe one last hero offensive. And so you can actually queue up when you're up against your supply limit. You still can queue up those units, which is why you see 2 marines, a marauder, 2 medevacs, 2 widow mines, all being queued up. They've already been quote unquote paid for, both in terms of money and supply, so they're coming out. But he's also probably queuing up or getting ready to queue up a bunch of marines so that if these units die, he can pump out marines at barracks that have the special reactor attached to them 2 at a time. He must have at least 7 or 8 barracks at this point, I would think, or at least 5 or 6. So that means a dozen marines all at once, which will overwhelm this already weakened and split and inefficient hero Protoss force. As you notice, Hero just can't get anywhere near the bases, even the brand new ones. Maru seems to be predicting his every move. He predicted the Colossi, got rid of them. He predicted the Ghosts. They ended up doing nothing. And so now all Hero can do is hit and run at the edge bases and the edges of the edge bases and try and do something. Maru retains that 20 to 30 army power lead. Now he has so many units that he's circling back behind Maru's units with his own ground and air units, which means he's going to be able to take out a bunch of these disruptors and possibly other units. Maru did lose a bunch of units there. Let's see if I can see. We're at, 1432. Because he was at back at 14 minutes and 43 seconds in the game, Maru was at 121 army units. And now he drops to 105, 103, 104, and then 91. So some of those disruptors did hit, and they specifically hit Maru's production of his SCVs, which I guess are, God, what does SCVs even stand for? God, how do I not know this? SCVs. SCV stands for, I don't know. What does SCV stand for? Something, construction vehicle. SCV. 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 What does SCV stand for? Well, whatever. The SCV is the Terran construction vehicle. The probe for the, which are probes for the Protoss and drones, for the Zerg. But the problem is, Maru's already sitting on $1,500 of minerals, 600 of gas, and with this other base that he put down right over here, that we saw, which I think he's already starting to put mines down to prevent ground movement into the base by what's left of Hero's army. So while the jump down, let me put it this way, that Purification Nova did kill a bunch of military units as well as some worker units, but it might be a case of too little too late in terms of momentum and just the quality construction and dynamic chemistry of the units that are out there. Yeah, as the announcer's saying, Hero is getting great Nova after great Nova. So these 1 in a million Nova shots, which Hero seems to nail 50% of the time, while the rest of us nail it 1% of the time, is the only thing keeping him in this game. But again, 92 to 68 in army power for Maru with all the upgrades and the money in the world. It is a dent, but it's late in the game, and Hero doesn't have enough infrastructure and enough of a long-term plan of unit composition. He had to start moving towards an air game or another late game. It's just all haphazard, and Hero likes the chaotic, but playing from behind, playing chaotic, now for 15 full minutes almost of game time is just too much to not have organized attacks. As I mentioned in the games where he does dominate that go longer than 10 minutes, by 9 to 9.5 minutes, Hero likes to launch a traditional big death ball, single force, but of well-balanced mix of anti-ground, anti-air, and special units, and do an attack at that 9.5 minute, 10-minute mark, and then every 2 to 4 minutes after that for the rest of the game, if he can, will launch a medium to large size attack of his Protoss to maintain at least a draw until he can overwhelm the opponent. But he's never been able to get into even equality territory, draw territory of army power with Maru, and so that strategy is not going to work, especially having invested so much in the Colossus strategy, which was completely dismantled in the beginning by all sorts of strategies and forces by Maru's Terrans. So as I mentioned was going to happen with this new base, this was the one that he just landed, that Maru built behind friendly lines and was now able to move to the front line, pre-built and ready to go. And because Maru had been keeping Hero on Hero's side of the map, he was able to get it all the way down here and land it safely with the worker units, with the SCVs. And as I predicted, all of those SCVs would immediately just go to minerals to let Maru basically have unlimited minerals when you're building just Marines and Marauders, which are only 50 or 100 minerals at a time. And so Maru's already back up to 105 military, 109. You can see his mineral totals go up, 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 up. Now he's up 116 to 84. It's getting to a point where the military supply is way too much in favor. Insult to injury, this base, which has been converted to, I guess this is an orbital command. The other thing they can be, the other thing command centers can be converted into is a planetary fortress, which loses or doesn't have all the special abilities like the scan of the orbital command, but it just has giant guns and can protect itself and everything around it. And so if you just want a base like this, which is purely for mining minerals and as a place to, briefly maybe rest some of your units, but that is it, is the perfect building to do, because it was already pre-built. And then the upgrade, the upgrade to orbital command or planetary fortress is 150 minerals and 150 gas, which may seem pricey, but if you're a Protoss player, is cheap and only takes 36 seconds of game time to do either of those things. Planetary fortress. Orbital command takes 25 seconds and only costs 150. So this planetary fortress that he built actually is way more expensive than the orbital commands. Even though they have the scanner sweep, they've got something called mules, which are giant SCVs that fly down and mine super fast. They have all these specials. All the planetary defense fortress does is have giant guns. But at 150 minerals plus 150 gas, and gas is generally worth twice what minerals are worth in terms of just how long it takes to mine it and how hard it is to get it and to maintain it and so forth, to staff it, to build the refinery, to get the gas barrels out, and to protect those workers, etc. Gas is worth almost twice what minerals are worth per unit. So a planetary defense fortress at 150 minerals and 150 gas is quite a bit more expensive in theory, on paper, than the upgrade to orbital command or just the building of other structures. But again, Maru is so rich at this point of the game, and his worker lines have been almost completely uninterrupted because he's been keeping all the action on Maru's half of the field, that he had more than enough money to do it. Insult to injury, there was a proxy, a last-ditch proxy gateway pylon drop attempt back there. Let's see if we can see it.
Oh, your damage has gotten lovely pick up there.
Here, let's see. Are we going to see it? I jumped back a few seconds as we get close to the planetary defense fortress. I don't know if we're going to see it here. All right, let me go back just a little bit for 1 sec.
But again, just
Those Novas work. These are very Maru can
your damage has gotten lovely pick.
of kind of hard to.
Where is it? Where is it?
Now he's on plus both micro and beautiful.
Maru is
But
Maru in such a recover from.
Okay, here it is. So here's the. So now he's already building, I believe, a barracks.
He's gonna donate a few more units at the planetary fortress.
I think that's barracks, but we went a little too far ahead there.
he's
To disrupt this. Maru
now he's on +3 weapons. I mean, but Maru again.
Maru is strong.
There we go. So yeah, so Hero was trying to sneak a gateway back here, and at some point before, it has to be powered obviously by a pylon. So there'd have to be a pylon too. But they destroyed the pylon, which shut down the gateway, and so Hero's attempt to have a place to beam in the units that's closer to the enemy failed and was replaced and is now being destroyed by this planetary defense fortress. Insult to injury. And so again, the planetary defense fortress, being a physical structure and not technically a unit, obviously doesn't count towards the supply of 200 overall, and is not contributing to this 108 number, nor are all these upgrades. So while it looks like it's 108 to 84 in terms of overall army power, Maru remains much more favored than that number it seems to maybe indicate on a surface glance. And something like defense fortress with its giant cannons defending an entire mineral base on its own down here, for relatively little money or time or even risk, is contributing at least 10 or what would be the equivalent of at least 10 or 12 army power with those cannons. How much damage do those cannons do? I'm curious. Let's look at the planetary fortress. All right, the planetary fortress, it can do so much. First of all, it increase if he's upgraded it at the engineering bay, which I'm not sure if he has, to this high sec tracking, that upgrades missile turrets and the planetary fortress, but that's not that big of a deal. The big thing is the Ibex cannon, which does 40 damage to ground units, has a cooldown of only 1.43, so it takes less than a second and a half to start firing again, can fire a range of 6, which is respectable for a building, but that 40 damage straight to the ground, and it has 1,500 hit points with tons of armor, is just absolutely ridiculous. And then you add on, it does have the double armor upgrade, at least, I believe, if we look, as we come back here. Yep, so it does have the double armor upgrade, although that's infantry upgrade, so I don't know if that counts towards buildings. He is trying to get that going here, is Maru, even though it's late in the game. Now we're back down at the planetary defense fortress. It's still firing at the defunct Protoss gateway that Hero ill-advisedly tried to sneak back there. And as the announcers pointed out, while Hero has hit 3 out of 3 maximum upgrade on infantry damage, Maru's about to get full 3 out of 3 upgrades on infantry damage and armor, so gets the advantage there as well in terms of protecting his units as well as dishing out damage. All these little cute 4-legged guys are just giant mines waiting to burrow and kill unsuspecting Protoss and protect the bases. He's just trying to figure out where to put them. You can aim them too, so they don't just explode in place, but they can kind of pop up and shoot. So now he's trying to bury them and shoot them very quickly while the Protoss are around. Hero very smartly gets his units out of the way of this increasing force, but especially of all these Widow mines, which could go as far as I think here, especially going from uphill to downhill. So it could have taken out quite a bit of, these are all ground forces, including these floating disruptors, which are considered ground forces. So now Hero's almost at 100, which is a nice number of army power for Protoss, especially with how much economy he still has going on. But he's still more than 30 behind Maru, who is now completely maxed out, and with fewer workers, it has way more money, has more upgrades.
What's really
here comes Hero to what was probably either the second or third base, but is the frontline base in terms of geography or whatever of the Terrans. He's trying to go after that, but as you can see, there's almost no the SCV workers are staying in place to serve as blockers if need be. They're not even mining. They're not mining anything. He pulled all of his workers. We'll see if he uses the workers to come out. As you can see, Maru is now at a full 50 higher of army strength than Hero at 130, which is extremely powerful for Marines. Now he does blow up the orbital center, and all of a sudden Hero's down to 37.
He does lose the PF, but Hero lost his entire.
Where did that exact attack happen? Did they just blow up all the disruptors? I think he hurt himself with the disruptor, and Widow mines are burying themselves and going off. He doesn't care if he blows up his own stuff. Maru at this point, he's got tons of other stuff. He's got snipers so they can shoot from distance. Marines have a surprisingly long range, and all of a sudden, Maru now has 3-4 times the army strength at least of Hero, and that's going to be end of game 16 minutes in without Hero mounting a major offensive the whole time. So an amazing start for Hero as we wrap up this first game of them. We'll take a quick break. But
way too long. Obviously, Maru did a great job with the repair, and Hero gave himself a bit of hope in this first game that honestly was pretty brutal from the very beginning.
Yeah, as the announcer just said, it was brutal from the very beginning for Hero. It gets increasingly brutal. It's the first game. Hero oftenly delays inevitable defeats so he can study the opponent and start thinking about his next plan. So he's not being annoying. When a lot of people say, "Oh, he should have done a good game." Here he does do good game, and we'll pause here on Maru, who never shows any emotion, unlike the Smiling Assassin, which is Hero's nickname. Not smiling so much at the moment as he's down 1-0, but as we'll see, he's going to make a great comeback. But Maru had sussed out Hero's entire plan that entire time. The problem with sussing out Hero's entire plan as your plan is that you have to get lucky in guessing right. And it is a guess as much as it is an analysis or a statistical prediction or whatever, because Hero is so unpredictable. And so what this is going to do for the rest of this series and into the finals against Bunny, where Hero will end up winning the whole thing, is force Hero back into his comfort zone, which is to be mischievous and annoying and attacking and aggressive right from the beginning, and much more unpredictable than he was in what was a pretty standard first game for him. If this was a best of 7, it would make a little bit more sense for Hero to almost throw the first game just to try strategy. In a best of 5, now he's down 1-0 and he has to win 3 of the next 4 games, which he is going to do. But it's a big deal. And while he did manage to stretch that game out to 16 minutes, by halfway through at 8 minutes, which is before Hero's traditional 9-minute or 9.5-minute giant first attack, which never materialized here because Maru was dominating around 7 minutes, 8 minutes in. Hero was just on his heels the whole time. No one other than Hero with Protoss in that bad collection of forces against Maru's perfectly balanced Terran force. No one other than Hero would have survived 16 minutes. So I suppose it's a type of moral victory, but when you're Hero and you've been around as long as he has and won as much as he has, you don't really give a shit about moral victories, excuse my language. And he's now ready to start dominating again with some super deep tricksiness like only Hero can do. So we'll look here and we're gonna get a little bit of analysis. They get slightly longer breaks as they get to the final rounds. And he's still smiling though, still looking calm, not sweating. Maru always looks completely nonplussed. Maru even looks bored just to be there. He's not. He must love this game. You don't become the winningest player in Starcraft history by getting bored of the game. It's just his personality. But while Hero's smile covers up a a deep passion that can come out in the biggest moments, which is why he will go on to win this championship and has gone on in the past to win numerous championships. Maru, for some reason, is always really, 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 really good in every game, but has trouble, as I said earlier, getting it to what I called 6th gear, which you only need and can only be reached at the highest levels, like semifinals or finals of something like the Starcraft 2 Dreamhack Masters. So Maru is up 1-0 now against Hero, and let's see how Hero comes back. I think starting in this next game, but we're going to see. As you can see right here, 0-1 in favor of Maru and his Terran army. Thanks for joining. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to jump into Game 2 of Hero vs. Maru from the Dreamhack ESL Starcraft 2 Masters in Atlanta 2022. Boy, is that a mouthful. Semi-final. Thanks for joining, and we will be back with Game 2 right away soon.